I mean, this is the bottom of the barrel here. I mean, this is getting really painful. But so the ground remains frozen for almost the entire year, particularly the eastern third of the island, which is permanently covered by an ice cap some 500 to 700 meters thick. I mean, just look at the variation just on the island. For only a brief period lasting 45 to 50 days, during the height of summer, the ground is snow-free. Summer temperatures rise barely above 8 degrees Celsius. The average annual temperature is negative 16 Celsius. In other words, Devon Island is a barren wasteland dominated by frost-shattered rocks and nearly devoid of plants and animals. But for scientists and researchers, Devon Island is an extremely interesting place. Its desert condition and harsh climate is very similar to conditions on Mars. Mars is farther than Earth from the sun, so is supposedly much farther than Earth from the sun. The temperature on Mars, according to Space.com, is relatively low, averaging negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Devon Island is negative 16. And you know what's crazy? Because, I mean, that's kind of close. You have negative 60, negative 16. I mean, when we're talking about these astronomical distances, I mean, I mean, it's just, the whole thing is just weird to think about, obviously, because, I mean, how would any of this be proven anyway? But, I don't know. It's kind of weird. It also has, again, according to Space.com, Mars has a thin atmosphere, which is 95% carbon dioxide. Earth is 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. I mean, you would think some of these differences might not result in exactly the same terrain. I mean, I don't know. Also, on Mars, allegedly, the temperature can drop to negative 128 Celsius. Devon can get to negative 50 Celsius. Now, Devon Island also receives little precipitation, but, I mean, obviously it's next to other oceans. I mean, you look up Devon Island, even on Wikipedia, and already you see water all over the place. So a landscape right next to a ton of water? I mean, it is an island. Next to a ton of water! And then, of course, you have, even if it doesn't get a lot of rain, whatever, but there's obviously hydrogen. I mean, there's obviously a lot of hydrogen and oxygen just through the water all around. And the landscape ends up looking exactly like Mars with no water, or very little water in comparison. I mean, does anybody find this strange? I mean, is it a big ask to believe that this planet, this huge distance away, allegedly, with not a lot of water, just happens to look the way Devon Island looks today? Because you could argue, I guess you could argue, if, let's say, there was a landscape in Antarctica that was landlocked, or even in the middle of Siberia, somewhere really far away from water that used to have water, but for whatever reason, it has some kind of unique isolation that Devon Island doesn't have. Like, you could argue there would be places, I mean, some of these deserts in Mongolia, whatever, surrounded by so much vast land, so far away from any rivers or oceans, that maybe had water in the past, and let's say 1,000 years ago, whatever, and now they don't. You could argue a little bit better that maybe it could end up looking like Mars slightly more. I mean, still no, just because of the vast, different of the elemental makeup of the atmosphere or lack thereof on Mars, and everything's just so different. And yet even the rocks look exactly the same. I mean, that's a big ask. It's a big ask to believe a non-indoctrinated cultist who wants to utilize logic and reason and the scientific method to just believe that Devon Island just so happens to look exactly like the landscape of Mars. I mean, just look at all these rocks in the Mars footage. Forget comparing to Devon Island. Just look at only Mars. I mean, how would that have ended up that way? And how could you prove it? I mean, goofs like Sartain would obviously never even ask these questions. But let me continue here. Since 2001, Devon Island has been the summer home for a group of people working on an international research project called the Houghton Mars Project that studies how human explorers might live and work on other planetary objects, in particular Mars. And this also goes to show, like, a lot of scientism cultists, a lot of authority-worshipping cultists and NASA apologists, these coincidence theorist goofs, They pretend that there's no research or money being done to travel back to the moon or to land humans on Mars. They pretend that the technology allegedly disappearing since the Apollo missions is not suspicious because there's no effort being put in to to sending humans back into space or the moon or Mars. Clearly there is, and there always was. I mean, these goofs, the mental gymnastics these goofs do to justify continuing their blind faith in the moon landings and the human moon landings. I mean, it's curious. I mean, these goofs will go to any depths. I mean, the cult is strong with these goofs.
Invest as little as £1 in the world.
Cult is strong with these goofs. Devon Island's barren terrain, freezing temperatures, isolation and remoteness offer NASA scientists and personnel a number of unique research opportunities. What a coincidence. Reads the project information page on NASA's websites. Other factors such as the Arctic day and night cycle and restricted logistics and communications capabilities offer fitting analogs for the challenges that crew members will likely face on long-duration space flights. Not to mention, I mean, the alleged orbit of Mars around the sun is allegedly also much wider than Earth. And yet it results in conditions that has a landscape that just so happens to look like only a specific area on Earth. Operated by the Mars Society and primarily funded by NASA, the research is based out of the Flashline Mars Arctic Research Station located on a ridge overlooking the Houghton Impact Crater, a 23-kilometer diameter crater formed approximately 39 million years ago when a 2-kilometer diameter projectile slammed into Earth, allegedly. How would they prove that, by the way? And why did no scientism cultists ever demand any evidence? Evidence according to the scientific method. Because there is no flowing water due to the freezing temperatures, weathering is minimal. As such, Houghton retains many geological features that craters elsewhere lose to erosion. The Houghton Impact Crater is said to have one of the most Mars-like terrain on Earth. Devon Island is not entirely devoid of life. The Truelove lowland area on the northeast coast of Devon Island is relatively warm and wet and has some vegetation and surprisingly some wildlife too. And that's kind of weird too, because when you look at the Truelove lowlands, it's still from a distance, even not from a distance, depending on the exact area you go to, it still kind of looks like Mars. And here you have wildlife and fauna and all this stuff. I mean, yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird. It just so happens to look allegedly like Mars. In fact, the high summer temperature of 8 degrees Celsius and those 50 days of snow-free ground occur in this area. The lowlands are poorly drained, favoring the growth of some moss, over which musk oxen graze year-round. Now, is this another one of these coincidences that musk ox just so happened to live in Devon Island, which is a Mars on Earth, which is a Mars research station by NASA. We're studying going to Mars. And the musk ox are, of course, native to the Arctic. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, is everybody following here? So allegedly, Devon Island. Devon Island allegedly looks exactly like Mars. Devon Island. Allegedly, this Mars research station where they test out all these different apparatus, landers, even spacesuits of certain kinds. I mean, again, amusingplanet.com here has a lot of photos. And, yeah, it just so happens that even musk ox live on this island. I mean, out of all the species, oh, man. All right. We have to move on here because, I mean, the coincidence there is they're probably having a field day. They're probably pulling out Olympic-level mental gymnastics here to try to write this all off. But, okay. All right, let's try to get back on topic here.
That this is from NASA's website.
That's
Do you
fine.
think that this is a faked picture of Mars?
But you'd have to also prove to me that the other one's from Greenland, and that is not a rendered picture that where you change the color of the landscape to green in the background. You use like a very simple procedure to do in Photoshop.
It's the other way around. They took out the clouds and made it a sepia tone.
And empirically, you were saying that. So I'm going to use the same method with you. Empirically, I do not believe that what you're showing me is that NASA did both. Okay. And by the way, even if they did, it doesn't make the Earth flat. It doesn't. So that's the issue with that. Like,
Doesn't make it a globe either, does it? Because notice how David Weiss didn't say that this proves flat Earth. Notice how he did not use that as an explicit. Maybe he does elsewhere, but right here, he just is basically showing how silly it is to have blind faith in renderings or anything coming from an organization that is not backing up any extraordinary claims. That's David Weiss's point there. Apparently lost on this poor goof, Michael Sartain, who doesn't even grasp that concept.
empiricism argument works both ways.
I'm just trying to disprove NASA. Once we discredit NASA, once I show you that if NASA's faking things in space, you can unwind it all the way to, they never went to space.